There we go. All right. Good morning, guys. We got a couple other folks coming in. So while that's happening, what I want to just kick off is, just again, summary. So a couple weeks ago, we talked through closing strategies. Last week, we talked through customer archetypes. And we went in the closing strategies, we went through kind of how to set up the close and what we're having the customer write down in terms of their beneficiary, what we're preventing, what we're creating, key benefits, and then the way that I've structured these is like family option, balance option, budget option. I think that last week we had a kind of a postmortem on that. Some of you said, yeah, that was working. There was some more connection there. You could tell the clients were a little more engaged. And then last week we talked through really kind of how to understand or a way to understand who it is that you're talking to, because customer frame or customer archetype matters. And so we talked about if there's a dependent at home, somebody that needs care, that's a care continuity archetype. And so that person's going to have the strongest why. The second strongest is spousal protection. And then third strongest was inheritance or housing continuity if there's like an adult child living there or a family member. And then fourth was inheritance. The father, mother just wants to do this for their kids as a way to set them up for a stronger financial foundation. So I want to kick off with just a quick post-mortem on last week's training. Did anybody employ those strategies? Did anybody identify some customer archetypes? Did that help you at all in your conversations and understanding kind of the core motivations of your clients as you've been talking with them over this last week? Sharing is
I
caring,
did.
guys. So hop on. Tate.
I'll share. I'll share. I immediately implemented the advisor role. It's basically a paragraph or two right at the beginning saying I'm your advisor, talking about one of the main. I don't have it verbatim here because I don't have it memorized, but it's easier. I just read it off of revisiting if you were not to do anything, what would your status quo look like? And that is it's good so far. It's not like I feel like these people are opening up, and I feel more comfortable on the call myself as well.
Okay. So what I heard you just say is that you employed the framing yourself as the advisor, letting them know before we do anything, let's talk about the option that most advisors won't talk about, which is doing nothing and just maintaining status quo. And what I heard you just say is your experience has been that people are opening up a little more. It's easier to get them to kind of flow into the why. Are you also asking for permission when you do that? Do I have your permission to just ask them some questions, get to know your current circumstances to see if this would even make sense?
Yeah, so here I have. So before we do anything, let's just dive into what does it look like? What's your status quo look like? Like, what are your current circumstances? That's how I do it. I almost do like a three in one question. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I think that's good. The way that I kind of phrase it is so, I set my roles as one, I'm here to serve as your advisor. Two, if this makes sense for you, there's about 40 different A-rated carriers. My job is to find us the best program, lowest price. And three, I'm here to answer any and all questions you have. I'm here just to be your source of information. But where I like to start is talking about, as your advisor, just talking about the option that most advisors won't talk about, which is the option of doing nothing and maintaining your status quo. Because you might not even need this, and I'm sure neither of us want to waste any time. And so, do I have your permission to just ask you a couple questions, get to know you to see if this would even make sense for you? I like that permission question right out the gate because there's a concept called cognitive dissonance. If anybody studied psychology, that would be, you probably know what that means. If not, cognitive dissonance is where the individual agrees to something or takes a stand with something, right? They position themselves in a certain way, and then something comes up down the road. They're kind of locked into that position. And if they were to change their position suddenly, that creates the cognitive dissonance where they're unlikely to do that. So when you ask them for permission, they give you that permission, they're taking a position that they're going to give you the information because they understand why you're asking it and they want the same thing. It would create cognitive dissonance if then they said, well, I don't want to give that to you. It's like, well, you just gave me your permission to ask this question. So it kind of opens that door and locks them into that position, which then decreases the probability that you're going to get pushback on any questions that you ask. And
Do you mind if I do you mind if I share one more thing about that, the asking for permission? In the previous job where Trevor and I were, there was the sales trainer named Darren Baird, and he called it a permission play. And in solar, it was, do you mind if I ask you just two questions at the very beginning? And the way I made it an analogy for myself is I have the microphone, metaphorical microphone, asking, do you mind if I ask you just two questions? I give the microphone to them. If they say yes, it's them giving me the microphone back. So I have the control to where the role is I am the teacher and they're the student. And they're a lot more attentive as well when you ask the questions. So you have to ask for permission, and then it lays just a fantastic groundwork for like, hey, you're going to listen, and then I'm going to be directing this. Essentially, the control. You would have the control after you get the permission.
perfect. Yeah, perfect. Beautiful. I hope you guys are taking notes on that. That's heat. We've talked about permission a lot. Trevor's talked about it a lot. Uh, we have the sales process and the script continues to evolve. I mean, where we've been is we started with if we're dialing fresh mortgage, we started getting into the why right away. And I've kind of drifted away from that to where I don't get into the why right away. Instead, I lay some foundation in order to create an environment where the customer feels comfortable with me asking more personal questions and getting into their why. And that has been working infinitely better for me. Has anybody else tried any of this, or is Tate the only one? Tate, thanks for being the trailblazer. Also, hey guys, if you guys are here and you're attentive, throw the cameras on. It's like it's me, Tate, and Trevor Trace now, and Amanda. And so like, I take time out of my day to prep for these calls and to host these calls. And so if you're here, I'm assuming it's because you're here to engage and learn something. The reason I'm here is to share what's been working for me. And so out of mutual respect, I just ask that you turn the camera on. If you got something else going on and you're here and that's all you can do is listen, I totally get it. You're not going to get kicked off the call. It's just kind of a common courtesy thing that it's not like we have 100 different people here. This is a pretty intimate group. So um, I know Trevor feels strongly about this. I do too, because when you're hosting these things and you're talking to a screen full of off cameras, it feels really fucking weird. And you guys will probably experience that at some point. So, also, I am going to do my best to not swear, but it's just part of my vernacular. So it just is going to happen. And if it offends you, I apologize in advance. But I think we're all adults here. So what I've been trying to think about is when I think about the script and the conversation, like there's typically a structure that we go through. And so, what we've talked about so far is like we've talked about how to get to know the family, how to get to know their circumstances so that we understand what kind of customer archetype we're dealing with, because there's very different motivations. We should be using different tones, asking different questions depending on what that archetype is. We also talked about, so that's kind of one layer in the structure. We also talked about a closing layer in the structure in which we're creating more emotional ties and surfacing more emotion before and even having them write things down so that they're seeing it in front of them. We've talked about that. So, what I want to chat through today is I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is really get to know our customers. And I think this is something that we as salespeople have a tendency to skip over. I know I do, which it's because we're moving quickly or we forget or it's different than how we were trained or what we've been taught. But I have some very concrete evidence of why this is important, which I'll get into. What I want to go through is the structure for understanding our customer. And the reason that that's important is obviously the deeper that we understand the client, the more well prepared and armed we are to have a conversation and to figure out the angle that we need to take in order to make this make sense for them. There's that old adage that life insurance is something that is sold, not bought. And so it is our job to figure out where are the holes in our customer's plan or our client's plan, and how can we help to fill those holes with our solutions. So how can we position this solution in a way that's going to make sense for them and satisfy a very real need? So that structure goes something like this in terms of understanding these are the things that we need to know about our customers. One is this is a part of the framework, but first we need to disarm them, which is what we just talked about, either positioning yourself as advisor, asking for permission, whatever it is. We need to get them to drop their shoulders so that they're comfortable disclosing things to us. And I think that the word because is very powerful here. So there's, I forget the person that did this, but it was a study on language, and they actually ran a study where they had somebody go stand in a copier line, and they would ask that person, hey, just if you're in a copier line, try to cut in front of the person in front of you. And in some cases they would say, hey, do you mind if I get in front of you? And in other cases they would say, hey, do you mind if I get in front of you because I need to make some copies? And it's like, obviously that person needs to make some copies, but what they found is that when that individual used the word because, they had a much higher success rate in getting low pushback for cutting in front of them. Even if it was, I need to cut in front of you because I need to make some copies. That worked better than just, hey, do you mind if I cut in front of you? So when we think about that psychologically, disarming the customer from the standpoint of, do I have your permission to ask you some questions? I need to do that because I want to get to know your current circumstances to see if this would even make sense for you. We're going to get them to lower their shoulders. So the more that we can think about like the psychology play and getting somebody to disarm and lower shoulders, the more powerful we're going to be, and the more information we're going to be able to extract from the client to really do our job the best. Right? If we don't know our client, we can't give them the best service. And I can't tell you how many policies I have flipped simply because the agent that came before me did not get to know their customer to a level that they could actually recommend the best solution for the customer. Case in point is a guy that I have last night that I've got an appointment with here in 30 minutes to submit his application. So the first thing that we want to understand is their home situation. And we've talked about this at length. I am a real big fan of understanding their mortgage. So understanding how long they've owned the home. Have they been in that home for 20 years? Have they raised kids in that home? Did they just buy it? But also understanding what is their mortgage balance? How many years do they have left? What is their interest rate? And obviously their payment. And the reason that we want to know those things is because we want to understand where their mortgage is going to be in the future, assuming that they do not refinance. This is very valuable because when we start talking with them about a case design, we're talking with them about a future set of circumstances and how our solution will help protect their family in that future set. So if we cannot communicate what the future set of circumstances is going to look like, we're going to have a really hard time painting the picture of why our solution is right for them. Is that making sense? Just nod your heads if that's making sense. Okay, if anybody's unclear on how to figure that out, it's called an amortization or a mortgage calculator, an amortization calculator. An amortization mortgage comes with an amortization schedule. It's a schedule of every month I'm going to pay $1,500. This month, this amount's going to go to interest. This amount's going to go to principal. Next month, a little less is going to go to interest. A little more is going to go to principal, and on and on and on and on until the mortgage is paid off. It's just math. And because it's just math, we can then look and say, well, at the customer's average life expectancy, like let's say 70 years old, and the average life expectancy for a 70-year-old man is 84. I can look and say at 84 years old, your mortgage will be this, assuming you don't refinance. And so now I know they may have a $400,000 mortgage today, but in 14 years, that $400,000 mortgage is only going to be $200,000. And you know what? If they refinance a $200,000 mortgage at that time, their payment's going to be a hell of a lot lower than it is today. And that may be something that the spouse can actually afford or not. So then when we start, this all goes into how we think about case design. So the first thing is understanding the home and the mortgage. Second thing is understanding their family, right? Which this plays into our customer archetypes that we already talked about. It also plays into understanding, like, do they have what their plan would be. I think that if any of you guys were on the call with Damon a while ago, asking, do you have family that lives near you? That's helping to, then we can understand if this person has to move, will they have family help? Or is Susan going to be 75 years old and trying to carry boxes out to the moving truck? Because if that's the case, like, that's probably not going to happen. That should be something the customer needs to think about, because that's something that they're going to need to provide financial resources for. So understanding the family, both from the standpoint of who is the beneficiary, what's the care situation, why are they doing this, but also is the support network? What does the support network look like? If the wife has to move, how does that change her support network? If the wife has a home emergency, if the water heater breaks or a pipe bursts, if she doesn't have any family near her, she's gonna have to pay somebody to come fix that. But if she's got a son that lives down the road, he might be able to handle that. And that will change the emotional tenor of how you frame what can happen and what future circumstances can look like. Does that make sense? If it makes sense, just nod your head. Okay. Third is understanding income, budget, and survivorship. So budget here is a little less important. The reason we really want to understand budget is so we can understand discretionary income, so that we don't run into I can't afford it, or I need to look at my finances objection. But understanding income today and the sources of that income allows us to do a survivorship analysis, so that we understand the circumstances, what the circumstances will look like when the inevitable day comes that the husband passes and the wife has to figure it out, or vice versa. Do you guys know how to do survivorship? Everyone clear on that? You shake your head if you're not, nod your head if you do. No, okay. Sort of. So just really quick, we could spend a whole 30-minute session on survivorship alone. In survivorship, the spouse will get the higher of the two Social Securities. So if the husband's got 4,500 coming in and the spouse only got 1,500, the spouse is going to get 4,500. Key point with this, it will take 3 to 6 months to transfer that Social Security to the spouse. What does that mean? I actually want to get some feedback. If you know it's going to take 3 to 6 months for Social Security to transfer to the spouse, you as the agent, how will you position your solution knowing that? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Trevor Trace, I believe in you, buddy.
Sorry, I had a customer calling me. Can you just repeat the question?
If you know that Social Security will take 3 to 6 months to transfer to the surviving spouse, and you know that the surviving spouse is going to get the higher of the two Social Securities, husband's getting 4,500 a day, she's only getting 1,500, and you know it will take 3 to 6 months for that to transfer to her, how does that inform your sale to her? How would you position your sale if you know it's going to take 3 to 6 months for her to get that?
Well, one, she's still losing income. So she's personally getting a higher amount, but their net income, like their net expendable income, is still going down. And so I think just saying that out loud kind of just helps them understand, because they may know that, but they don't think about it. And then they don't think about 6 months from now. And then I have a sheet where I have all their bills laid out. And so if they've already given me their bills, I can say, okay, so now your utilities are still going to be this cost, and this is still going to be this cost. And so it just kind of paints the picture. It's like a good way to paint the picture, get emotion, get more info out of them, and just have them run through the next 6 to 12 months.
That's very true. She will be getting less income. However, there's a 3 to 6 month gap there, right? Not only
Yeah.
is she going to be getting less income in the long term, but there's a potential she's going to be getting substantially less
Oh,
income
yeah.
3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah.
If they're getting 4,500 for him and 1,500 for her, that's 6,000. And Social Security is going to stop sending that check once they understand that he is deceased. So now that 6,000, that just dropped to 1,500, right? That's $4,500 of lost income immediately for her. Now, granted, the Social Security may continue to send that check. They're probably not that on top of it, so I don't really know how long it's going to take them to figure out that he's no longer living. But when you're pitching that to a client or when you're talking with a client, that's a very clear income replacement need, right? Even if just for the 3 to 6 months. So I used that to sell a deal with a client that, hey, every insurance needs to have a job. You said you have all this insurance. What is that going to do? Like, why do you have that? Why 70,000? Like, why that number specifically? Well, I don't know. It's just what the guy gave me. Okay. Well, if you don't know what it's supposed to do, that means you're either overinsured or underinsured, but it means it's a very low probability that you're correctly insured. And overinsured is just as bad as being underinsured because it means you're paying for something that you don't need. And if you're retired and on fixed income, that means you got money going out the door that you don't got to have going out the door. Do you want to be overpaying for your insurance? No, of course not. So as we're understanding the client. So guys, survivorship, spouse is going to get the higher the Social Security. Pensions work a little differently. If the guy's like 100% disabled from the VA, then there will be the spouse will get their VA disability. Pensions all work a little differently. CalPERS, they can make an election so that 75% of the guy's pension will go to the spouse. But ask them those questions of, will that pension, is there a survivorship benefit to your pension? Most people know. If they don't, Google search it, ChatGPT, whatever. But what we want to do is figure out, like, okay, let's do a quick survivorship analysis on what your spouse's income is going to look like after that day comes and see where she's going to land. Case in point, yesterday I'm talking with a gentleman and he got a $25,000, somebody placed a $25,000 policy with Royal Neighbors at $170 a month, $168 a month. I couldn't beat that. So the next closest option was Forrester's PlanRight Preferred at like 181. And so I've got some options there. I can try to upsell him into Forrester's and get him out of Royal Neighbors, which that's pretty tough because he's paying more money for the same coverage. I can try to get him to increase coverage. So i.e. create a need or identify and surface a need that he is underinsured, or I can point out that he's overinsured and get him to go with a smaller policy with somebody else where now I'm in control. So if I can't beat it head to head, I got to change the playing field and show him that he doesn't have the right plan in place and that I'm giving him the right plan. So the reason that I'm mentioning all of this is last night I'm talking with this guy and I've got good rapport. I'm trying to figure out the angle. And what became evidently apparent is he's not going to spend more money on insurance. He's not going to increase his insurance. I got to figure out a way, is he correctly insured or is there something better for him? And so I said, hey, let's just do a quick survivorship analysis. How much is your CalPERS? How much is hers? What's your Social Security? What's hers? Do you have any other sources of income? And I added it all up for him. And it's like $8,600 that she's going to have. So then we're looking, he's got a $400,000 mortgage today, but in 14 years, that $400,000 mortgage is only going to be $240,000. So I do some quick math and I find that, hey, the plan should actually be to have her, does she want to move from the house or does she want to stay there? He's like, no, she wants to stay there. Okay, so the goal is to have her keep the house, not sell it. He said, yeah. I said, okay, can I propose a plan? He said, yeah. I said, when you get a little older, if you get sick, you start getting to that stage, refinance your home, reset the mortgage term to 30 years. That'll drop your payment $700. She is then going to have, $8,600 in income and her mortgage payment's only going to be $2,000. She's at like a 25% debt to income ratio. That seems pretty comfortable. Would you agree? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, then you don't need a $25,000 policy. All you need is income replacement for 3 months while your CalPERS and Social Security transfers to her. That's more like 15,000. And look, I can save you $70 a month and you have a solid plan where you know what's going to happen. You can communicate that to your wife. You guys actually have a plan now and we're going to save $70 a month in the process. How's that sound? He's like, dude, what do we got to do? And so I was like, well, we just got to submit an application. I have another appointment right now, so I can't do it right now, but I'll call you tomorrow morning. Is 9:15 work for you? He said, yeah. So I'm highlighting that because if I don't know his circumstances, I don't know what his wife wants to do. I don't know what his mortgage is. I don't know what their survivorship looks like. I'm never going to be able to sell that deal. The only reason I'm able to sell that is because I'm able to look and actually create those future circumstances and educate him on what he's actually going to need so that I can position myself as the expert and create a solution that actually satisfies the need without over-insuring. And now I'm not competing with what he has head to head. I'm introducing a whole new strategy that's more effective and efficient for him. Does that make sense? Okay, last thing of this. So what we've gone through is first we disarm, then we understand the home and the mortgage. We understand the family situation, which helps us to understand client positioning, the customer archetype, as well as their support network. Then we understand income and survivorship. And then lastly is we need to understand their assets. And you guys hear all day, every day, ask the question, do you have anything that acts like mortgage protection? Because that creates an annuity set, but there's a whole other reason to do this. And the reason you need to understand their assets is so that you also understand what kind of position are they in? Are they in a position that they have assets to kind of float that period of time where Social Security is transferring over? Are they putting those, do they intend to put those assets into something that's going to be a lifetime income benefit where they're not going to have that liquidity? Do they have it exposed to the market? Do they not have any assets at all? What's their intention for that money? So that you understand how they're thinking about their own financial circumstances, and you're not going to recommend a strategy without understanding the playing field. We have to understand the field we're playing on in order for our strategy to be effective. Otherwise, we have an incomplete and uninformed strategy. The customer, the client will identify that right away, and then they're going to hit you with an objection you didn't see coming. And now you look like the uneducated, unprepared advisor, and you just lost all credibility. That's a really hard sale to close when you propose a strategy to somebody and then they hit you with, oh, well, I have this, I could just do da 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 da. If you do not have some rebuttals top of mind, i.e., I got $100,000 in my savings account, I'll just use that, and you don't quickly come up with, well, but what happens if you were to get like cancer or a heart attack, or you were to have some kind of major health condition and you've got all that money in your savings account? Do you know what the average cost of cancer is treatment in the United States, even with the best health insurance? It's about $80,000 per year. And so if that happens to you and you have all that money in your savings account, do you think the hospital is going to just not come after that? Because that's why medical bankruptcy is such a big thing in our country. So what we should be talking about is how to protect that 100,000 from potential creditors, because 7 out of 10 people will either end up with a critical, chronic, or terminal illness or in a long-term care facility. The other 3 out of the 10, that's like car accidents and sudden heart attacks and that kind of moving on from this world. But 7 out of 10 are going to land in that. And so what we should be talking about is let's make sure your 100,000 is protected, but this life insurance that we're talking about, this should serve the job of protecting your family. That 100,000, I'm sure that you didn't work that hard for that long to just have to earmark that and not be able to touch it. And I know you didn't work that hard for that long for some health condition to give somebody else the right to come take it from you. Would you agree with that? So there's rebuttals you can have top of mind, but if you know that from the jump, you're much more well-positioned to have a solid presentation, a solid strategy that's less likely to receive objections. That was a lot. Any quick questions before we break? Is this making sense to you guys? I'm hoping so. Okay. All right.
My only question real quick. I'm sorry, I was crossing the border, but is survivorship something that's automatic? Or is it something that like they have to fill out and qualify for? That's why it takes like 3 months.
No, they got to fill out and qualify. They don't have to qualify for it, but they do got to fill out. They got to fill out some paperwork, send that in, go through the process. So no,
Okay.
not necessarily automatic. Any others? Okay. Guys, thanks for turning your cameras on. Thanks for being here. Reach out to me if any questions come up afterwards. Hopefully y'all got my contact. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks, guys.